Put four in it. If you put four in it might help.
You're on. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. As we get started, I just want to remind everybody we are video and audio recording this, and it's being streamed live on the Township's YouTube channel. The mics are in the ceiling, but they will pick up side conversations. So if you don't want everybody in the community to hear what you're talking about, just know that the mic, Big Brother's listening. Thanks for coming. I am Steve Pegram. I am the interim fire chief for Harlan Township. I think most of the people here already know Steve Mason, our township administrator and assistant fire chief. And basically tonight is to go over the fire levy that will be on the ballot in May. My plan for tonight is to hopefully answer all your questions before you have questions. I have a pretty in-depth PowerPoint, and we'll talk about everything from the levy ask, what it's going to cost, how taxes work, the current budget, the future budget, if the levy passes, how the money will be spent, how that will improve service to the community, and other cost-cutting measures that we're looking at and ways that we can be more efficient and save the community money, but also provide excellent fire and EMS services to the community at the same time. So, Steve, if you would advance.
Switch this over here.
Sure. We're going to switch so you can hear me, but you can see the PowerPoint at home. So one thing I did want to bring up, especially for those watching online, is when we sent out the letter, we had scheduled the next meeting like this to be Saturday. Saturday has been canceled because of a conflict, but we're going to do it on Sunday. So the next meeting, just like this, where we will talk to the community and answer questions, will be this coming Sunday, March 16th at 1 p.m. And then we'll do another one Saturday, April 5th at 9 a.m. And I'm happy to add more, or even come out and meet with a community group or a family or a church group or anybody that wants to meet and talk about the fire levy. Please just reach out to me, and I'd be happy to do that. On your table, and I just want to take the opportunity to let the community know that we are planning the first ever Harlan Township Fire Rescue Health and Safety Fair, Saturday, April 5th. Going to be 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. And basically, it's just an opportunity to bring in all the resources in our community and in the county that could benefit residents of Harlan Township. It's not geared towards any specific age, but you will notice if you look at the list of people that are going to be there, a lot of them benefit our senior citizens population. So everything from Warren County Senior Services, Adult Protective Services, Meals on Wheels, Health Source of Ohio, the Warren County Sheriff, Warren County 911, Warren County Emergency Management, Red Cross, Warren County Veteran Services, Premier Health, the Fire Department, and our 9 Lincoln Auxiliary. We're going to have some food, we'll have some music, and basically all those people will be at the fire station just providing information, resources, and connecting our community with the resources that they have available. So again, that's Saturday, April 5th, 9 to 1, and hope to see you then. We're here tonight to talk about the fire levy that is on the ballot for May. This is just a quick slide, and you'll see it 2 or 3 times through the presentation just so we are constantly aware of this. But I wanted to give a quick summary out of the beginning. So it is a 5-year levy. So previous levy ask was a continuous levy, meaning once you vote it in, it's there forever. This is a 5-year levy. So that's good and bad. The way I look at a 5-year levy is it's an opportunity for the community to fund the fire and rescue department, and for us to prove to you that we can be good stewards of the money that you gave us and that we do the things that we said we were going to do, right? So it's holding us accountable with your money. If we do a good job and you're happy with the service that we're providing, in 5 years we will have to come back to the voters to either renew or replace that levy, or the money will go away. But it is only a 5-year levy, 2026 through 2030. 3.5 mil levy will generate about $863,673.93 to the fire department in property tax revenue. What that means, if you're trying to calculate for yourself, it's $123 a year. It's actually $122 and a few pennies, but the auditor rounded it up to $123 a year for every $100,000 in appraised property value. And we bring that up because that's what the ballot language says. But what does that mean? It means it's $123 a year for every 35,000 of assessed property value, because your property is assessed at 35% of your property appraised value. Just looking at an average home in Harlan Township, so I pulled the census data from 2 years ago. The average home in Harlan Township is priced at just over $300,000 a year. So the average home in Harlan Township would pay an additional $375 a year. And if you want a quick formula to try at home, if you take your assessed value, multiply that by 3.5, and then divide that by 1,000, that will essentially tell you what you owe. So a $35,000 assessed property value times 3.5 divided by 1,000 gives you the 122.5. But just so you know, the auditor and the language that's on the ballot does say 123 because the auditor rounded up. Next. So Harlan Township has not had a tax increase that funded fire and EMS in 21 years. We do have 3 current fire and EMS levies that were approved by voters. There's a 1990 2.9 mil levy, a 1992 1.6 mil levy, and a 2004 1 mil levy. So a total of 5.5 mils has been approved by voters in the past. However, these levies are currently collecting at the rate of 1.61 mils for residential and agricultural properties, according to the Warren County Auditor. So as time goes on, and we'll talk about this in a second, the revenue stays flat or just increases a little bit with some growth, but the millage is reduced as the community grows. So the community voted for 5.5 mils, but we're actually collecting 1.61 on residential and agricultural properties. Next slide. So a lot of people have already said this to us, and I've heard this in the community and all over, right? Because everybody went through a big reevaluation in the past year. Everybody's taxes have gone up. So my taxes just went up. Why are we asking for a levy? So your taxes did just go up, your property taxes. However, fire and EMS did not get an increase. So when they do the reevaluations for your property taxes, the general fund, the county, the schools, road levies do get an increase. Whatever the millage changes, whatever the new property value is, it's based off that, and they reset those levies or those funding sources, and they get an increase. Fire and EMS, if we had a police levy, which we don't, but police levies, fire levies do not increase when there is a reevaluation. So the money we were bringing in 2-3 years ago is the same money we're bringing in now. We did not get an increase in our revenue. As the voted millage is reduced, revenue stays relatively the same. The only new revenue we get as a fire and EMS agency is when there's new construction. So if somebody builds a brand new house, there wasn't a house there before, we get the value of that house based upon the millage that's on the books. So with a township that is mostly rural and doesn't have a lot of subdivisions, we do have some growth, but we don't have a lot of growth. Generally, the revenue remains relatively flat or some slight increases depending on usually residential growth as it occurs. When property taxes go up due to the reevaluation, as I mentioned, that money goes to the general fund, schools, county tax revenue. Those all increase. That's where your money is going. But the revenue for the fire and EMS levy remains the same. And again, we don't get the increase until there's new construction and once they have a certificate of occupancy and they're evaluated by the auditor's office. So let's talk a little bit about the current budget and what our financial situation is currently. So the 3 current levies that I just spoke about, that are all pre-21 years ago, generate $460,394.01. So that is the revenue that Harlan Township Fire and EMS is estimated to bring in from tax revenue in 2024. Our operating budget, or what we're projected to spend in 2024, is $588,515.21. Obviously, that is more than the revenue we're bringing in from property taxes. But what is that operating budget? That is basically everything we have, everything we do that runs the fire and EMS department. So that's insurance on the buildings, insurance on the trucks, insurance on the equipment, fuel, gas, utilities, EMS supplies, pharmaceuticals, the drugs we carry on our ambulances, utilities, gas, water, septic, internet, telephone, computers, radios, EMS equipment, uniforms, turnout gear, equipment, vehicle repairs, vehicle maintenance, training, part-time salaries, and our volunteer stipend that we pay our volunteers for making runs and attending training. That's what goes into that whole operating budget. So just like a home budget, just like you at home, we pay a Duke bill, we pay an electric bill, we pay a gas bill, we pay a phone bill, all those regular bills that you would think a family or a business would pay. So if you look at those two numbers, $460,000 of revenue, $588,000 of spending, that doesn't look really good. So you would think, hey, you have a deficit, and that number would be $128,000 and some change. But in reality, the way we make up that deficit is funding by a combination of grants, fundraisers, donations, and EMS billing. So we'll talk about EMS billing a little bit more later, but we do bring in approximately $90,000 a year, and that's money we recoup from insurance companies for transporting people to the hospital. So when you add that money together, it takes care of the deficit, allows us to have a balanced budget, which legally we're required to have. So the Ohio Revised Code requires a township to always have a balanced budget. So if you ever hear a community doesn't have a balanced budget, it's fiction, because by law, you have to have a balanced budget. You can't operate without a balanced budget. It's state law. We're not the federal government. So talk a little bit about EMS, because really this levy is all about EMS. And when I say EMS, I'm talking about emergency medical services. I'm talking about the EMTs and the paramedics that respond in the ambulance to take care of people when they have a medical emergency. Unfortunately, EMS is not free. So Harlan Township does bill some of the costs for EMS transports, as do pretty much every community in Southwest Ohio that I know of. EMS billing came about in the 1990s, and really what occurred is the hospitals stopped providing EMS with free supplies and drugs. So back in the 80s, back in the early 90s, if we transported to a hospital and we used an oxygen mask and some tubing and a bunch of Band-Aids and let's say gave some medications, whatever equipment we used on that run, we walked in, we filled out a form, and the hospital handed us that equipment back, and we put it on our ambulance and we went home. All of our supplies, all of our equipment on the ambulance were free, provided by the hospitals. The hospitals realized, and we're going through some financial hardships, they realized there's nothing under the law that requires them to provide those supplies. So they just literally cold turkey stopped doing it in the mid-90s. And then all the fire and EMS departments all over the globe, and especially in Ohio, had to figure out how are we going to recoup this. Rather than raise taxes, a lot of departments implemented EMS billing as a source of revenue to recoup some of our equipment costs. EMS billing does not pay for EMS. It doesn't even come close. So currently, if you're a Harlan Township resident and call for an ambulance, a bill for that transport is sent to your medical insurance. So whether you have private insurance, you have insurance through Veterans Administration, Medicare, Medicaid, any type of healthcare plan that you have, that is who the bill goes to. And all those companies have a already pre-negotiated amount with the insurance companies. Just like when you go to a doctor's office or you go to the hospital, almost all these plans already have built in a transportation fee for an ambulance. So you're already paying for it if you're paying for healthcare insurance, or if you're blessed to have healthcare insurance provided by your former employer or Medicare or Medicaid or something like that. It's built into the plan. But what we do is, because you're a resident of Harlan Township, we assume you're a taxpayer. So we accept whatever the insurance company pays, and then we write off the balance of the bill. So if the bill is for $1,500 and the insurance company pays $500, we write off the $1,000 for residents of Harlan Township, because we assume you're also paying property taxes. If a mutual aid ambulance has to handle the call, meaning Harlan Township's not available or Harlan Township is unable to get a crew to respond to that call, our residents don't pay taxes in the community that is responding to our emergency, and therefore you will receive a bill for the transport. So the write-off that Harlan Township provides residents does not apply if a mutual aid ambulance comes into Harlan Township and takes one of our residents to the hospital. Why this is really important right now is we often do not have enough volunteers to staff the ambulance. So many days our ambulance is not making calls in Harlan Township, but Goshen, Blanchester, Salem, Morrow, Hamilton Township, some of the other neighbors are making those calls, and residents are getting the full bill for those calls. Mutual aid can't provide our residents with a free service, right? If they came into our town and took you to the hospital and not recouped any EMS billing and the township didn't pay them anything, essentially they're providing a free service to our residents that their residents pay taxes for. So just to put it in perspective, we're currently paying, I think it was 1.6 mils. Some of our neighbors are paying 7.5, some are paying 9, some are paying 12, some are paying 14. Nobody is paying 1.6. Even if we pass this levy in May, we will still have the lowest millage of any of our neighboring communities as far as fire and EMS services. And unfortunately, when the resident calls 911 and we're not available, we're unable to respond, the resident could be liable for that bill, which could be as much as $1,600. So I want to recap what happens in Harlan Township when there's a 911 call. So you call 911, you're a township resident, and Harlan Township responds to that call. We transport the patient to the hospital. We have a third-party billing company that invoices your health insurance, like I talked about. All the plans have some type of pre-negotiated reimbursement rate for EMS transports. You're already paying that as part of your healthcare premiums. And the healthcare plan pays our third-party billing, the negotiated amount. If you're a township resident, we use a soft billing model, which means we never send anyone to collection. We don't play those games. And we write off the balance of the bill for township residents because we assume you're paying property taxes in Harlan Township. If you were a resident, let's say of Goshen Township, you were driving through Harlan Township and you got into a car accident, if we came and transported that person to the hospital, they are paying the full price. They don't get the discount. They don't get the soft billing that I talked about. So it works on both sides. Now, what's occurring a lot, sometimes a couple times a day, sometimes just a few times a week, someone dials 911 in Harlan Township and we fail to respond, so we have to call mutual aid. The mutual aid ambulance transports a patient to the hospital. The third-party billing company will invoice your insurance. Whatever the insurance pays, they will accept, and then you will receive a bill for the balance of the call. So this is an actual real bill that was given to me by a resident of Harlan Township. He unfortunately was injured. We were unable to provide an ambulance, so Goshen Township came and picked him up. And after the insurance paid, he received a bill for $1,334 from Goshen Township for making that ambulance transport. So just want to cover the fact that if we do nothing, the problem doesn't go away, right? You're still going to be paying, whether you're paying property taxes and billing or you're paying a lot more in billing, you're still going to end up paying for that level of service. So either, like I just said, either you're paying for billing and taxes or you're going to pay billing a lot more. The other thing that we're trying to get ahead of here is our neighboring communities could bill Harlan Township residents through EMS billing about $600,000 a year. If we didn't provide EMS or all of our calls went to mutual aid, they would recoup that billing money. But then those townships could also invoice Harlan Township their actual cost of providing that service. So we have guesstimated that to be at approximately $1.1 million. So if you add all that up, you're looking at almost $1.8 million to provide EMS if we allow our mutual aid departments to handle it for us or come into Harlan Township. Whereas if we pass this levy and Harlan Township improves the service delivery that we can offer you, it's actually $335,000 cheaper. So nobody likes taxes, I get that, but in our scenario tonight, the taxes that we're asking Harlan Township to pay is actually cheaper than what the liability could be to our community, both the residents and the township itself, if we were unable to provide EMS services to the community. So I want to talk a little bit about our organization. So this is the current makeup of the department. It's almost completely volunteer. We are one of 2 volunteer fire departments left in Harlan Township, in Warren County. All all the other departments have slowly made that transition from when they were volunteer to part-time paid, and then a lot of them have transitioned to some full-time paid or a combination of part-time, full-time paid. So just understand that this is a natural process that, you know, all of our neighbors and all of our neighboring communities do have full-time and part-time paid EMS staff currently. We have a part-time interim fire chief, that is me. We have a part-time assistant chief township administrator, that is Steve. We do have one part-time employee that is what we call the volunteer recruitment and retention coordinator. However, his part-time salary is reimbursed to the township through a grant. So we were successful 2 years ago applying for a federal grant for recruitment and retention of volunteers. And that grant pays for that part-time employee to manage that program. And it also pays for the onboarding of any new volunteers. So if we bring in a new volunteer, that grant pays for their training, that grant pays for their uniforms, that grant pays for their turnout gear, all the things that we used to have to pay for as a township to onboard new volunteers. The grant reimburses us. Now we still have to budget that money and spend it, and then we send the invoices and we get reimbursed, but we have to spend it first. So we have about 45 volunteer firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, and cadets. Cadets are our high school students that are hoping to go into this as a career in the future. So talk about the problem that we're having and what is the reason for the levy. The need for a levy is directly tied to our failing volunteer fire and EMS model in our community. Often no one responds when we get dispatched to a fire or medical emergency. This is why we're using so much mutual aid. This increases response times, which in the case of a fire results in a larger fire, potentially more property damage. In the case of a medical emergency, delay in providing patient care can have a negative income on survivability and could even lead to death. So somebody who's having trouble breathing and waits too long for an ambulance could end up in cardiac arrest. We don't know that that has occurred in our community, but the rate that we are failing to respond to calls has consistently been increasing as the reliance on volunteers is sort of a flawed system anymore. Next slide. So I want everybody to understand that this is not a Harlan Township issue. This is a United States issue. This is an Ohio issue. This is a Warren County issue. So all I did was did a quick Google search of Ohio failing EMS agencies, and these were all the headlines that popped up. So several counties around us or to the north of us, but all over the country, from sea to shining sea, everybody is dealing with these failing fire and EMS agencies, especially when they're relying on volunteers. A lot of our neighboring communities that rely on part-time and full-time people will tell you that the part-time system, which is what we're trying to go to, is failing. They're not getting as many part-time people as they used to. I feel pretty confident that we can make it work, but just know that there's a lot of challenges in the career field right now. It's not just a Harlan Township issue, it's a nationwide issue, but definitely a Southwest Ohio issue. So what we're proposing as part of this levy is basically a reorganization of our department. And I'll talk about a whole bunch of different facets, but the main part and the most important part is that EMS piece, the ambulance, because that's what we use and that's what the residents use the most. That's where we save lives. So Harlan Township needs to start the transition to a combination fire and EMS agency, which means a mix of paid per call personnel. Those are technically volunteers, but they would get paid when they make a run or go to a training. And then part-time people that would staff our ambulance, and potentially at least one full-time personnel to oversee that process. The goal is to guarantee an immediate response of a paramedic-equipped ambulance to the residents of Harlan Township all day, every day. Currently, sometimes our ambulance doesn't get out at all, which is a problem. Sometimes our ambulance gets out and there's 2 EMTs on board. EMTs are what's referred to as basic life support, so they can provide basically advanced first aid, but they can't give medications, they can't push drugs, they can't do a lot of the more advanced procedures that paramedics can do. We only have a very small number of paramedics, so part of this levy is the people that we hire part-time will be paramedics, or our goal is to hire as many paramedics as possible, so that when we are providing a staffed paid ambulance, not only we're providing a staffed paid ambulance that's going to respond immediately when the tone goes off, not 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes later waiting for volunteers, but that ambulance will be equipped with paramedics. So you're getting a higher level of service and you're getting the higher level of service quicker. Obviously, this will help reduce response times for fires and other emergencies as well. These folks' primary mission responsibility will be EMS and specifically targeting the paramedics. But we intend that some of these people will also be cross-trained as firefighters. So if we do have a fire and everybody's in quarters, they'll jump on the fire truck and handle that emergency as well. Hopefully this will lessen the burden on our current volunteers. It'll allow them to focus on the more major events, serious car crashes, structure fires, large brush fires, or even a second EMS call, and focus their attention on training. So one of the big struggles for volunteers is, pretty much the majority of our volunteers are married, have a job, have kids, they coach or attend Little League or whatever. They have a lot of life things like most people, and they are a volunteer firefighter or a volunteer EMT. There's a lot of requirements that go into the initial training, and then there's continuing education that they have to do for every certification that they have every 3 years. So it's a big burden on them and a lot of time that they're putting in at the station just to do training. So we want to lessen that burden on them, free them up, so the time that they're putting in with us as a volunteer really just goes towards responding to the more serious emergencies when we need help and keeping up on their training and certifications. The benefit to you all will be improved service delivery. We will provide a faster response and we will provide a higher level of care than we currently provide. So as I go through this, I'm just going to recap. Again, it's a 5-year levy, not a continuous, 3.5 mil. The 3.5 mil will generate a little over $863,000 a year. It's about $123 per 100 of appraised value, or the average homeowner will pay about $365,000. So we're asking for money, right? We're asking for an increase in taxes, but I know people want to hear also, well, what are you going to do with my money? How is this money going to be spent? Is there a plan? And there is. So what the plan is basically what I'm proposing or calling the reorganization of our fire and EMS department. We will still have a part-time fire and EMS chief at the top. If you look on the left-hand column, that's basically how we operate now. So we have part-time assistant chief, we have volunteers and paid per call people at Station 81, and we have volunteer paid per call people at Station 82. What we're adding to this matrix is what I'm calling the EMS division on the right-hand side. So we are proposing that we would probably hire one full-time employee that would oversee everything, and I'll go into more detail about that in a few minutes. And then we will hire a group of part-time employees. Those part-time employees will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to staff primarily the ambulance. And the benefit to the community is a staffed paramedic ambulance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So when we talk about these part-time people that we want to hire, all their salaries lumped together is calculated at approximately $630,720. To do that, we're going to have to hire between 18 and 24 part-time people. Now, we do anticipate a whole bunch of our current volunteers who have the training and certification may want to transition from being a volunteer to being a part-time employee with us, which would be great. But we are going to have to go outside the department and outside the community to hire some part-time people. One part-time person who's on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year will cost us at the high end $210,240. But that's 6 to 8 people sharing that job. So nobody's making $210,000 a year. That's 8 people who are making a piece of that. So that calculation is based on a top-out pay of $24 an hour times 24 hours a day times 365 days a year, and then multiplied by 3 because we're proposing that we would have 3 people on duty. Why 3? Why not 2 when you only need 2 to get the ambulance out the door? So pretty much it's the standard in the fire and EMS industry that you staff a little bit higher than what your minimum is, so that if somebody calls off sick, if somebody's unavailable, if somebody's at training, anything happens, life happens, right? We're not having to pay overtime or take an ambulance out of service because we don't have enough people. So the thought process is schedule 3 people per day. If we drop down to 2, we can still keep the ambulance in service. At 3, when we have a fire, we could staff a fire apparatus. At 3, if it's during the day and Steve or myself are there, we could staff a second ambulance. So we could provide 2 ambulances with that personnel. The advantage of part-time people is one, and part-time people don't like to hear this, but I always say it's not a better solution always, it's the cheaper solution. That's why we have part-time fire and EMS, because you'll see in a second, it's significantly less expensive for part-timers. But the other thing is, with part-time employees, we may have 24 part-time employees, but those people receive no pay or benefits if they're not working. So if they don't work, they don't get paid. So we're only paying that one person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week times 3 people. Doesn't matter which of the 24 people are working, because we're only paying 3 people per day, and we're only paying the people that are on duty physically working. In a career paid department with the full-time, they're paying the full-timers whether they're working or not. So if a full-time employee is on vacation, if a full-timer goes off sick, they're paying that full-time person their salary, plus they're now paying another full-time person overtime to work their shift. So that's why it gets really, really expensive. Chief officers, again, keeping the part-time fire and EMS chief, keeping the part-time assistant chief, and then we would look at hiring 1 full-time EMS supervisor. No, we're not paying that person $128,168. When you factor salary plus the state required pension, plus the cost of health care, plus the cost of Medicare, plus the cost of workers' comp, et cetera, that's how we came up with that $128,168. I want to be very transparent and honest with you. This might have to be a part-time position. I think it's going to be really important to have somebody full-time focused on EMS, and EMS is the majority of what we do as an organization, and someone to supervise that 18 to 24 people, because now somebody has to schedule them, call them, take the phone calls when somebody calls in sick, get them uniforms, get them training, get them turnout gear. Now we have employees, right? We don't really have employees right now. So we're adding a lot to our organization. My hope is that we can fill that with a part-time or a full-time position, but we may have to hire a part-time person starting out. The item in red is, I talked earlier about the grant that we have. My goal is that once we pass the levy and we start hiring some people, we will move the responsibilities of our grant coordinator as well as the grant administrator to the chief officers. And so, yes, we will be spending about $206,000 a year on those 3 people's salary and benefits, but we will get reimbursed $40,000 a year through the grant. Does that make sense? So it's actually $160,000 per se. We'll transition all of our volunteers to what I'm calling paid per call. Currently, our volunteers get a stipend at the end of the year. They get paid, but they only get paid once a year in December. Basically, we calculate how many runs they make, how many trainings they attend, all the different activities we have through the year, and then there's a point system that calculates a dollar amount, and they get a check in December. What we'll switch to is what's called a paid per call or part-time system, where if they make a run, they will get paid a rate of pay based upon their certification. So if they're an EMT, it'll be one rate. If they're a higher level paramedic certified, they'll be paid a little bit more. And so this is, we currently have paid per call or volunteer captains, lieutenants, EMTs, medics, firefighters. This is basically what that cost will be to maintain that system, but maintain it either part-time or paid per call. Just so you understand, so this is proposing, what is that, 50, 60, 70,000. We spent 90 last year. So this part of the package is actually a little less. The reason why it's a little bit less is the part-time employees will be making the majority of the ambulance calls. So our volunteers that are currently making those calls and getting a stipend for it wouldn't be making those calls. The part-time people would. That makes sense. So there's a little bit of a offset there. Total salaries and benefits comes to $915,888. So actually more than the levy will even generate. What that'll do for us is it'll provide that part-time staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's that $630,720 I talked about, 18 to 24 part-time employees. We'll retain the 2 part-time chiefs. We may hire a full-time, what I'm calling EMS supervisor position. We will maintain the paid per call system for our volunteers and community members. And again, we'll be able to seek $40,000 in reimbursement from our grant for that as well. So kind of recap the money stuff, and then we'll talk about some other things. So revenue and expenses for 2026. So this is looking future forward. All the old levies, as I told you, currently generate $460,394. The new levy, and that will be on the ballot in 25, we won't get that money until 26. We'll generate $863,673. We do get about $90,000 a year in EMS billing. The reason why that's in red is because currently we're not making a lot of runs. And in order to get EMS billing, we have to make runs. So although we got $90,000 last year, I'm anticipating we're not going to get $90,000 this year because we've made less runs. That money's going to Goshen, Blanchester, Morrow because they're billing for the runs, not us. If we bring that back inside and we start making all those runs, not only we start bringing in $90,000 a year, but I anticipate we'll actually generate more revenue. Not a lot more, but more. But if you add all that up, if the levy passes in 2026, we will have approximately $1,414,067 to operate our fire and EMS department off of. So if we look at our existing budget, operating budget that I spoke about, it's $588,515. Within that $588,515, 190 of that is currently being spent on salaries for part-time people and the volunteer stipends. So back that out because that's getting moved to a different line item. The new staffing plan that I showed you a few minutes ago totals $915,888. So total estimated expenses for 2026 would be $1,314,403, leaving a surplus of revenue that we would earmark towards future capital, which is trucks, buildings, expensive items of about $99,000, just under $100,000. What our plan for that money is to put that money aside every year. And in 5 years, when we're due to order a new ambulance, we will have the cash to make that purchase. So an ambulance currently runs around $390,000 unequipped. So if you add the cot, the Lucas device, the cardiac monitor, you add another $120,000, $150,000 to that. So you're right at the $500,000, $550,000 mark for a new ambulance. And that price is just going up. So talk about the positions that I have discussed with you tonight about the reorganization of our department. The hire this full-time person, right, that I spoke about. Typically, they'll work Monday through Friday during the day. They will supervise all of our on-shift paid staff. So right now, we don't have paid staff, so we need somebody that will supervise our paid staff. They will oversee everything that our department does that has to do with EMS. So the vehicles, the equipment, the supplies, the drugs, the protocol, the training, making runs, scheduling, everything involved in our EMS program. They also will be able to cover shifts, right? So this person will be a trained firefighter, paramedic. And so if we have a call off, if we have a second ambulance call, they will be able to fill gaps. And again, I want that flexibility so that, let's say, God forbid, somebody calls off sick at 7 a.m., right, at shift change. We don't have to try to call around and try to find somebody to come in and work. If the assistant chief or the EMS supervisor's there, they may be able to fill that gap. And we're actually saving money in that scenario when they work shifts and cover shifts for us. They will coordinate the SAFER grant, which will allow us to reimburse the township some of their salary. And they will, just like all of our chief officers, they'll be on call nights and weekends for any serious emergencies or coming back in if God forbid, something major happens in Harlan Township. Then we'll talk about the reorg. We're talking about this, 18 to 24 part-time firefighter paramedics or EMTAs or EMTs. Those are different levels. Paramedic being the highest level. EMTA is called, or EMT advanced, and then a basic EMT. Like I said before, I anticipate a bunch of our people that volunteer with us now may want to transition to part-time, but those that want to stay volunteer paid per call, more than welcome for them to stay. In fact, we are going to need them Plus, we're still going to be recruiting volunteers because we're going to need people for this community for a long time in the future. I do not see part-time pay or even full-time pay being a permanent long-term solution. I think this township will continue to have a mix of some part-time people, paid on-call volunteers for a very, very long time. Those people's, again, primary duty will be being the paramedic on the ambulance, making sure that ambulance gets out the door as quickly as possible. They could provide some first due fire staffing as well. If they're in quarters and, God forbid we have a house fire across the street, I'm not going to make them sit in an ambulance and wait for volunteers to come get the fire truck. I'm going to have them get in the fire truck and respond. That's the better service for our residents. That'll provide a faster response. They will handle maintaining the buildings, taking care of the vehicles, and doing some stuff that we don't do currently. So currently we don't do a lot of fire inspections, public education, outreach programs, things like a safety fair, things like home visits. They'll be able to do all those things for us. So when they're being paid and on station, they're not just sitting there doing nothing between calls. They're going to have a host of responsibilities both in the station and out in the community to provide education and outreach. And the most important thing is why part-time paid people? Because it provides an immediate response to your emergency. Right now, again, it can be more than 10, 15 minutes for a volunteer to respond. I don't know that anybody had this question on their mind, but I wanted to answer it. Why not just hire full-time staff? And there's the obvious answer. So one paramedic ambulance staffed with part-time is going to cost us $630,720 at the high end. It probably costs us a little bit less than that. To hire full-time paramedics to staff that same ambulance would cost the township a little over $1.2 million. Full-time people obviously have much higher rates of pay. They get a state pension, which requires 24% paid of their salary into the pension by the township. That's a liability under state law. They get health care, and they get time off, and they get sick leave. And then if they're off, you have to backfill them. So full-time staffing gets very, very expensive very quickly. So as we summarize the reorg, so we're going to convert the part-time assistant chief position that we have that's currently vacant to a full-time EMS chief or EMS supervisor, maybe. Keep our volunteer paid per call assistant chief's position, change our captains and lieutenants from paid on call to part-time, possibly reduce that from 6 to 4. Currently we have kind of a hodgepodge of officers. What makes the most sense to me is that you have a captain at each firehouse in charge of the station, and then you have a lieutenant at each firehouse that's kind of their assistant to help run the station, look after the equipment, the trucks, etc. We will do a hiring process to hire part-time firefighter EMTs and paramedics. Our goal is to have 3 on duty every day, 24/7, 365. But again, our minimum will be 2, so we can run an ambulance with 2. And we'll have to create a new pay scale for all of our pay-per-call people, volunteers, and our part-time staff as well. What does that do for the community? Why are we asking for this money? It's going to guarantee staffing for that first out EMS unit with a paramedic. It's going to enhance staffing capabilities of our part-time or our paid-per-call volunteers. It'll provide quicker response time to all emergencies in Harlan Township. So staffing is the #1 priority of this levy. In fact, I showed you that all the money that the new money that's going to come in, 100% of that plus is going to be spent on payroll type expenses. But we have other things that we have to worry about as a fire and EMS department. Buildings, vehicles, equipment, training. There's no money in this levy for those items, but we do have, and we're starting to work on a plan on how to address those because those problems are here. Those problems don't go away. So this levy will not provide funding for new fire trucks and equipment, but we're also looking at how can we be more efficient as a department. So when we look at our organization after the levy, let's assume the levy has passed and we've implemented this program. Our part-time staff will staff either Medic 81 or Engine 81, which is the fire truck at Station 81 in Pleasant Plain. Our chief officers will be on duty and also on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as they are now. And then our volunteers or paid per call people are still going to be responsible for staffing our battalion, which is our duty officer, our rescue truck, our engine, our tanker, our second tanker, our backup squad, our brush truck. So all of that stuff is still relying on that volunteer paid per call staff that we have. So there's still going to be a great need for volunteers and paid per call people for our department. If we just went to part-time staffing only, we basically would have an ambulance or a fire truck, nothing else. So one of the things we can do as an organization, I've only been here 4 months, but one thing we can do to look at an organization, save money, is trucks are a huge liability for us from a financial impact. The cost of everything has gone up, but at some point they have to be replaced. So we currently have 2 fire engines or pumpers. We have 3 fire tankers or water haulers because the majority of Harlan Township does not have fire hydrants. We have 3 brush trucks, we have 2 ambulances, and we have 5 staff cars, which are either pickup trucks or SUV vehicles, typically driven by chief officers and stuff like that. What I'm hoping to do over time, and this is not in a year, it's not in 5 years, it's going to take time to implement this, is reduce that down to 1 fire engine, 2 tanker pumpers. So right now we have pumpers that pump water and fight fire, and we have tankers that haul water. They build trucks that can do both. So instead of buying 2 trucks that may cost you $1 million each, I want to buy 1 truck that maybe costs us $750,000. So we've reduced the size of the fleet, doing that from 15 vehicles down to 11, potentially 10. But what that also does, yes, we would be buying some new vehicles, but we'd be selling the old vehicles, and it would also reduce all the other costs associated with that fleet. So the more vehicles you have, the more repairs you have to budget for, the more maintenance you have to do on those trucks, the more training you have to do with your personnel to be able to drive and operate those trucks, the more insurance we have to pay to the insurance company for that. And so if you're insuring a $500,000 vehicle, you can imagine what that auto insurance policy looks like. It's very, very expensive. So if we reduce the size of our fleet, make our fleet more dual purpose and more efficient, we can reduce costs as part of that too. So just 5 years ago, these are factual numbers I got from neighboring departments. If you were out shopping for a new fire engine, it would cost you about $500,000. Today, that is over $1 million. The last quote I saw was $1.2 million. So it went up significantly in 5 years. We've never seen increases like this before. A fire tanker, or that water hauler truck some people refer to, was about $300,000 5 years ago. It's now in excess of $500,000. Hamilton Township, our neighbors, just took or is taking delivery of one. It's just under $600,000. It's like $580,000, $590,000 for that truck. Ambulances, as I mentioned, $250,000 5 years ago, $380,000 in 2025. Brush trucks, upfitted 2 of them 5 years ago for $120,000. Now they're $200,000, $225,000, and going up. And even SUVs. So we can purchase SUVs and cars off state bid or off fleet programs where you get a pretty good discount. 5 years ago, a Chevy pickup truck was $42,000. Now it's $58,000 in just 5 years. So all these costs are going up. Why I bring that up is we are never going to be able to afford $1 million fire trucks. It's not going to happen. We do not have the tax base for it. We don't have the commercial base for it. We don't have the resident population for it. We can't afford $1 million, $1.5 million fire trucks and things like that. So we have to figure out a better way to run our fire department, be more efficient with the money. So what I'm proposing is that at some point in the future, we will look at replacing one of our fire engines and one of our tankers with what I call a multi-purpose truck or a pumper tanker. This would save us about $1 million in vehicle replacement costs over 25 years, which is the average lifespan of a fire truck. We could look at a lease purchase program where we spread those payments over 12 to 15 years. So we're just making annual payments instead of having to put out $1 million, $2 million for a purchase. Again, if we own less vehicles, we'll have less cost of tires, repairs, insurance, training, all those ancillary costs. We'll have less vehicles to train on, so less training hours that we have to pay our people to be in the firehouse and doing. And we need less drivers. Right now, if we have, let's say, just a basic fire and a crew responds to the station, they get in the pumper truck, which is the truck that fights the fire, and they leave. And then somebody else has to come and get in the tanker truck to bring the water. right? So we need 2 drivers and 2 crews to get those 2 trucks out to just start a fire attack. With a pumper tanker, we need 1 driver, 1 crew. So we're not relying on as many volunteers as we're seeing volunteerism go down, and we're seeing less people responding to calls, especially in the daytime when most people are at work. This allows us to send 1 truck that can do 2 jobs instead of 2 trucks that can do 1 job each. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Next slide.
That's the next one.
Oh, yeah. Same slide, different information. We would also look at doing it a second time. Only this time we would sell 2 tankers. We have 3 total, and 1 of multi-purpose or pumper trucks, and buy another pumper tanker. So a pumper tanker at Station 81, pumper tanker at Station 81, a pumper tanker at Station 82. Right now there's a pumper and a tanker at 82s. There's a pumper and 2 tankers at 81s. So what I'm saying is we just have 1 of each at each station, reducing the size of our fleet and the cost of our fleet. Again, the rest of the information is the same. And then we need a vehicle that fills the gap, right? So what I would propose is we look at some type of quick attack vehicle. We have 3 brush trucks. I would propose we replace 2 of those brush trucks and purchase a truck. The one in the picture is on an F550 chassis. Basically, this is a truck that we could take to an auto accident, wires down, tree down, storm damage, a brush fire, any of those more minor type emergencies that don't require a $1 million fire truck to respond, only needs 2 or 3 firefighters to respond. There are companies out there, the FAM stands for Fire Apparatus Manufacturer. So I could buy that truck that's in the picture there from a fire apparatus manufacturer for about $550,000. But I also have some experience from another department where you can go buy a chassis from a chassis manufacturer, and you can go buy a utility body from a utility body manufacturer, and then you can put lights and sirens in it, and you can stripe it, and then you purchase what's called a skid unit, which is basically a pump and a water tank with hose that just slides into the bed, and you can do that and do the exact same thing for half the money. So that's what I'm proposing. Like, let's be smart with our money. We don't need to spend $550,000 if we can get away with doing it for $250,000. I've done it before. One of our neighboring departments has 2 vehicles like that at the time were actually closer to $150,000. But again, this is going to reduce costs of maintenance, repairs, insurance, the number of drivers we need, reduce the wear and tear on the bigger trucks. Currently, when we have those types of calls, we're taking a full-size pumper to those calls, and now we would be able to take this like quick attack vehicle. We're still going to need ambulances no matter what. We currently own 2 ambulances. It seems to be a good model for us. It's good to have 2, so if one's out of service, if one needs maintenance, we always have one in service, and we do occasionally get 2 calls at the same time or get a bad car accident where we have multiple patients. So we will continue to have 2 ambulances. We will continue the thought process of replacing an ambulance every 6 years, but keeping them frontline for 12 years. So that with the age of our current ambulances, that would mean we would order an ambulance in 2028. Currently, if you order an ambulance today, it takes 2 years for delivery. So the 2018 ambulance would be replaced in 2030. That's year 5 of this levy. And we would use that unencumbered funds I showed you at the very beginning, where we have a little bit of surplus every year, about $90,000 of surplus. 90,000, 90,000, 90,000, 90,000, 90,000. Now we have the cash to buy an ambulance. If for some reason we don't bring in as much money as we're projecting to, we might have to push the ambulance out another year or 2. We'll just monitor that as we go through the process. But 2 ambulances now, 2 ambulances in the future. This process we've actually already started. So currently we have a mix of a Jeep, 2 pickup trucks, well, 3 pickup trucks, and several SUV like Tahoe expedition type vehicles that are used for chief officers to drive to emergencies, for our first responder vehicle, which people can come and take to respond to a call if it's just 1 or 2 people, and our brush trucks. So what I've proposed is that's actually the truck driven by Assistant Chief Mason. It's a Chevy 2500 pickup truck. The nice thing about a pickup truck is it's very dual role. I'm going back to this dual role, dual purpose vehicle. How can we be more efficient? So instead of buying SUVs for the chiefs and then buying pickup trucks for the brush trucks, what if we just buy a pickup truck? We give it to a chief officer, whether it's me or Steve or another person. They drive that vehicle for a few years. And then when it's time to purchase another vehicle, we purchase another pickup truck. The older pickup truck that's now 6, 8 years old, we take that skid unit, which again is basically it's a box that fits in a pickup truck that has a water tank, a water pump, and hose on it. And you can just pull it out of one truck and you can move it to the next truck. And so the plan is if we buy a pickup truck every 2 years, over the next 10 years, we will replace the 7 SUVs and pickup trucks that we have, and we'll reduce that down to 5. So again, reducing the number of vehicles by having a vehicle that is dual purpose, and we can simply slide the cap off the back of the chief's car and slide the pump in the back, and now it's a brush truck. Over time, as a fleet is reduced in size, we will sell all of those vehicles. So we will sell Engine 81, Engine 82, Tanker 81, Tanker 82, Tanker 83, it's supposed to say, or 84 actually, Brush 81, Brush 82, Brush 84, and as we replace the SUVs, we'll sell the old ones. Sale of the older equipment will be used to offset the payments on new vehicles. So new vehicles will probably be a lease purchase. It spreads the payments out over a longer period of time, makes it more affordable for the community over multiple years. It decreases the financial impact of paying cash all up front. But again, this whole plan as far as vehicles is not part of the levy money. This is just my thought process moving forward. How can we continue to save money? How can we be more efficient? How can we provide the best service to Harlan Township? If we're only getting 3, 4, 5 volunteers to a call, why do we need 14 vehicles? Does that make sense? So let's be more fiscally conservative. Let's be more efficient, I like to say, with the vehicles that we own and use dual purpose vehicles. Other items that haven't been addressed or not in the budget, not in the levy ask, but just to show you some of the other things that we know we'll have to forecast in the future. Cardiac monitors, those are the things that shock your heart. Very important tool. They run about $55,000 a piece. Self-contained breathing apparatus, that's the air packs, the compressed air cylinders we wear into a fire. Currently, they're about $8,000. We won't have to replace those for a few years, but when we do, I anticipate it'll probably be a lot more than $8,000 based upon the cost of everything these days. When you buy a new ambulance, you have to buy a new power lift cot, which is the stretcher that you ride on. Those stretchers are $60,000 a piece. Jaws of Life, which are the extrication tools, we have a set at Station 81 and a set at Station 82. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of car crashes, but when Harlan Township gets a car crash, unfortunately, it's usually a pretty serious car crash. A lot of speed, a lot of windy roads, a lot of hills. So we need those extrication tools. A full set of rescue tools is $54,000. Now, good news for the community is we did get a LOBE grant in 2023 and 24, as well as took some money from donations and fundraisers that we had. And we already have purchased one set of extrication tools. So actually, right now at Station 81, they're training on those tools because it's training night tonight. So we'll be putting those tools in service at Station 81. So in the future, we'll be looking at grants and other opportunities to buy another set for Station 82. And then that brings me down to the bottom, which is grants and donations. So there are a lot of grant programs out there. Some of them are $5,000 grants. Some of them are $1 million grants. We're going to go after all of them. Every grant, every opportunity. I wrote a grant this week for, and this is not a joke, canned bottled or canned water. So instead of us going to Costco and buying cases of water for rehabilitation to give firefighters after they fight a fire or when they're on a wildfire or brush fire, we buy that and we just buy cases, we store them at the firehouse. Budweiser has a program where they actually run a beer distillery, but instead of beer cans, for like a week, they do cans of water. And it still looks like a beer can, but it says on it in really big letters, water. So I applied this week, and if we get chosen, they will deliver us a skid load of canned water. So I'm looking at anything that we can get to use grant money, because the only way we're going to replace trucks, cardiac monitors, air packs, power lift cots, Jaws of Life, fire hose, radios, all the things is by chasing grants and getting donations. So we're still going to have to bring in money other ways. The levy is not going to pay for this. The levy will pay for people. To recap, 5-year levy, 3.5 mils, generate 860,000 and change, $123 for every 100,000 in appraised property value. The average home in Harlan Township, which is just above 300,000, they would pay about $375,000 additional a year. And what do you get for that? You're going to get a staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, paramedic, ambulance. And we're going to get to your house. We're going to get to your emergency faster. That's the advantage for the residents. As I mentioned at the beginning, our next meeting, we'll be repeating this presentation. Will be not on Saturday. That meeting has been canceled. It will be Sunday here at the old Butlerville Elementary in the Township Meeting Hall, where we are right now at 1 p.m. And then we'll do another one Saturday, April 5th at 9 a.m. And now I will literally take any and all questions that you have. Just remember, we're on video and they can hear me and they can hear you. So fire away.
This seemed like a really good letter. Is every voter in Harlan Township going to get one?
So we mailed it through a mail sort company and we gave them the Board of Election list for Harlan Township. So the Board of Election has a list on their website of every registered voter. And all we did was download that, sent the letter, and sent that list and said, we want this mailed to every voter in Harlan Township. And we did that last Friday. So most of you probably got it Monday or Tuesday, I would guess. I don't know when you received it. And why did we do it so early? So I will tell you, I've done lots of fire levies for lots of departments. I've been in the fire service 40 years next year. So I've been involved in a lot of fire levies, a lot of budgets, a lot of grants, lots of stuff. But I usually wouldn't start a levy campaign until about 30 days before the vote. Because if you start too early, it just sometimes creates a lot of chaos, right? Early voting starts in 2 weeks. So you as residents, if you absentee voted in November, you will probably get an absentee ballot again. Or if you want to request an absentee ballot, you can do that now. But early voting starts in 2 weeks. So I wanted to make sure this letter and this Q&A session was done before people started voting. A lot of people in Harlan Township voted during the presidential, like 92, 93% of the voters. That's like the highest I've seen anywhere voted. But more than half those people voted by mail or in person at the Board of Election. They didn't vote on election day.
The reason I asked, my wife got one, but I didn't.
So we sent one per household. If you looked at the address, the label, it said your last name and household. So a lot of families have 3, 4, 5 voters in their home. So just a cost reduction, right? Instead of mailing 5 or 6, because we had to pay for this. The fire department can't pay for the levy materials, so we had to use donations to pay for the levy materials. So instead of sending 5 letters to your house that were identical, we sent one. But we did mail out over almost 3,000.
Why do they use the assessed value instead of appraised value? Is that just?
They're two different things. So the ballot language says appraised value.
Appraised value is higher than
what you
the
actually,
assessed value.
but if you do the math, it comes out the same either way. If you want to speak to this because I know you do it better than I do.
Yeah, so I dealt with a lot on the last levy. The ballot language is confusing in several ways. One way is that we're asking for a 3.5 mil levy. Right, that 3.5 mils really is easier to correlate directly to your assessed value. So the easiest way to calculate what a levy is going to cost you is to look at your assessed. And the reason that is that whether you have just a home on acreage, if you have just acreage, or you have CAUV, which is the current agricultural use value, if you have a combination of all those things, I know at least a couple of you here have both of those things, right? You can take your tax bill and look at the assessed value. That's all you need, because if you have CAUV, there's some different categories there and kind of get you down in the weeds a little bit. So if you simply look at your assessed value and you multiply that by the levy millage, which is 3.5, and then you divide it by 1,000, And that's because that's how a mill relates to a dollar value. I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that, but that's why if you divide it by 1,000, that's going to get the cost to you. I don't know the reason, so the state sets the ballot language.
Well, the last one had the same thing. It had the.
It has to, yes. Yeah,
it had
we have no
value in
choice.
it because
Yeah.
That's the state tells us what the ballot language will say in the
Yeah,
purpose.
so
But we
yeah.
agree, it's very
it
confusing.
is confusing. Yeah, so your assessed value is 35% of your appraised value. So the way the auditor does is that his goal is to make your appraised value about 85% of what you could actually sell your house for. So your appraised value is not what you could call a realtor and say, hey, come look at my house. How much could I get for my house? That's not really your appraised value. That number on a auditor's website is going to be lower. His target's 85%. Now, is it always that way? Not, mine's even a little bit lower, probably. It's gonna be on the lower end. And then what you're actually assessed on is 35% of that number. Why the state chose to put the appraised verbiage in the ballot language, I don't know. You'll also see it used, and actually Warren County's website does this too. The auditor uses appraised and true value. Well, those are the same thing, and they use them interchangeably in different places. I can't give you an answer why.
That's all right. My other question is, you talk heavily about volunteers. I have two questions. The first question is, how many volunteers do we currently have? And secondly, where are you going to go to get these volunteers? Do you zero in like LM Gig has at a career center
Absolutely.
to get them?
Yeah, so we have about 50 people on the roster. It changes, we add a person, we lose a person. So there's about 50 people total on the department. Of that 50, 3 of us, myself, Steve, and Lieutenant Whitty, are part-time employees. But Lieutenant Whitty's salary is paid for by the grant. So Steve and I are the only part-time paid employees of the fire department. The other, what's easy math, 47 are volunteers. Of that 47, about 12 to 15 of them are cadets. Those are high school kids. So our real number of volunteers that could potentially be responding to calls on a fire engine or an ambulance is about 35 people. But keep in mind, some of those people are just firefighters. They don't do EMS. Some of those people are just EMTs. They don't do fire. And so you don't really have 35 people. You may have half that amount for a fire response or half that amount for an EMS response. Really what we're seeing in Harlan Township, which is the same problem they're seeing everywhere, is with life in general. And as I said, most of our volunteers are married. Most of our volunteers have a job. Some of our volunteers have 2 jobs. A lot of them have kids. We have become the 4th, 5th, or 6th thing on their schedule of things to do. So all great people. And the fact that Harlan Township has maintained a volunteer department for as long as it has. I mean, there are very few volunteer fire departments left in Southwest Ohio, like less than 10, like south of Dayton. Hamilton County, I think, has like 2. As I mentioned before, Warren County has 2. Claremont County actually only has 1. And they don't do EMS, so that makes their life a little bit easier because EMS is where the majority of the runs are. They contract that out. So I don't want to put it in a doom and gloom situation, but volunteerism nationwide has been kind of dive bombing I've been doing this almost 40 years, and 40 years ago at my volunteer fire department, we were talking about how are we going to get new volunteers? How are we going to get people? And that department that I ran with 40 years ago as a volunteer now has paid people. Goshen Township, which is where I was the fire chief before. Goshen Township used to be all volunteer with paid people on the ambulance. And then they had to start hiring more paid people for the ambulance, and then the second ambulance, and then the fire truck. And now they have 20 full-time people, 35 part-time people, and really not very many volunteers left except for me. I happen to still volunteer there. But to answer your second question, I think number 1 is the career centers in the high schools. So the cadet program that we run, which are all high school kids, getting them involved and interested early, getting them the training and certification when they're 16, 17 years old. The state won't certify them until they turn 18, but they can do all their training and get ready and be prepared to be certified when they turn 18 years old is how I started. It's how Steve started. And if you go to all the neighboring fire departments in the region, the vast majority of those of us that are in our 40s and 50s and 60s, that's how we all got started, was as cadets. We joined when we were 14, 15, 16 years old, fell in love with it, whether we stayed on as a volunteer or like I did, made it a full-time career. That's the one key point. The other one would be people that potentially move into our community that have prior volunteer or part-time paid experience might be interested. We do have a bunch of people that live in Harlan Township that don't volunteer with us, but are career firefighters somewhere else. So their day job or their shift work that they do is career firefighters. As we hire part-time people, they may be interested in working a part-time job for us instead of working a part-time job somewhere farther away. Who doesn't want to work close to home? So we're hoping to tap that resource. And then it's just constantly recruitment and retention. So the reason why we have that grant is to constantly be doing recruitment. We're always recruiting and always will be recruiting for more volunteers, because as you gain volunteers, you always lose them. Life changes, more kids, new job, they move away, whatever happens. Probably what has exacerbated the problem for volunteer fire and EMS specifically is all of these towns, whether you're in Hamilton County, Claremont County, Warren County, Clinton County, up into Montgomery, Greene County, Butler County, all of these towns had volunteer fire departments 30, 40 years ago. But over the last 30 or 40 years, they've all become paid departments. So when I got into this, you could go a year without a department even advertising they were hiring a paid firefighter. Now, there's 20 or 30 departments hiring right now. You used to be able to be a volunteer. If you were lucky, after being a volunteer for a couple of years, you could be part-time somewhere for a few years, gain some experience. And by the time you were 27, 28, 29 years old, you might get hired in your first career firefighter job. My son got his first career firefighter job at 21.
Oh, it's definitely.
So what that has done for us, though, is the people that used to be really active and volunteer with us because they had no other options, now they have options. So why would I come, and this is not a dig on our people, it's just reality and finances, right? Everybody has bills. Why would I come to Harlan Township and work for free when I can go to Goshen Township and make $24 an hour? Or get hired full-time and make, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. And they're on the low end of pay. If we go to the north, the pay goes up even more. Some of the departments in Warren County, obviously much more populated, much more busy departments, are paying six figures for firefighters. And we're still paying essentially nothing.
They have the tax fees.
They do, but you still have fires, you still have ambulance calls.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately. Great question, though. Yeah, but I don't have an exact average, but I can tell you we had a house fire. We went to a house fire this morning at 4 a.m., mutual aid to Clarksville. They had a house fire with reported people trapped. Luckily, nobody was inside, but a pretty major fire. And we had 4 volunteers and myself responded. So out of that 50. And that's pretty normal. I mean, sometimes we get 10 or 12. I don't remember how many we had on 2nd Street in Butlerville.
About 12%.
A couple weeks ago, we had a house fire, but it was a Saturday night, 10 o'clock at night. A lot of people were home. So about 12, 14 volunteers. But we had a fire on Morrow, Kazadale a few months ago, and we had daytime when everybody's at work, and we had 3. So hence why we don't need 14 vehicles. There was a time where 30, 40 volunteers showed up when the whistle blew, but back then they did 25 fire calls and 100 ambulance calls a year. Now we're doing several hundred of them.
It's different.
Yeah, unfortunately. Sir.
You answered every question I had written down, so I'm glad I came to this meeting. So I thought your presentation was great.
Mm-hmm. Very thorough.
My concern for you and the township, I guess, is how do you we got 7 people here.
Yeah.
How do you get that word to others to understand this? Because I didn't know what your numbers was.
Right.
Now I understand what your numbers are, and I think that's the biggest challenge.
So,
especially since we just had this big tax increase.
yep, absolutely. So multi-pronged approach. The reason why I told you at the beginning this is being video and audio recorded is it's being streamed live on YouTube. There are people watching because we have people.
17?
There's 17 people online. So there's more people online watching right now than there are in the room. It's still not 5,000 people, right? It's not 3,000 voters. We have a Facebook page. If you're on Facebook, Harlan Township or Harlan Fire and EMS Levy. We will post this video there so people can link to it and watch it. We did the letter to every voter so they were aware. We don't want anybody to say, you know, we were trying to sneak something in and not advertise that we're doing a levy. We will be putting out levy signs around the community, which again catches people's attention and causes them to ask questions. We have a email that's on the material that we sent out. It's on the Facebook post that is Harlan Fire EMS Levy at gmail.com. Since the letter started hitting the mail and that email was advertised, I've gotten about 12 emails from residents asking really good questions. And I've done my best to try to give them as much information, just like tonight, as I can so they can make an educated decision on how they're going to vote. And we're still considering probably doing at least one more or two more mailers with information before the election in May. So the disadvantage that we have is as a government entity, we can't campaign for a levy. We can't use public funds to campaign for a levy. We really shouldn't, you know, be driving around in a fire truck with, you know, a PA saying, you know, vote yes for the fire levy. That's actually illegal. So we have to be very careful how we do this and get the word out. But part of the way we get the word out is the people in this room and the 17 people online tell their friends and family. And hopefully the telephone, you know, telegraph, telephone, tell a friend occurs throughout the community. I think a lot of people are aware of the levy issue just because it's come up before and there's been a little bit of controversy about it. So we're just going to keep banging the drum and pushing out information all the way up until Election Day. Other questions?
Well, there's just a different direction that was taken back in 2023.
So,
I mean,
and I think some of that, regardless of what happened before me, all well-intentioned people trying to do the right thing for the community. I got brought in as an outsider, as the acting chief. My other job in the real world is I'm a consultant. So I have a consulting firm that does nothing but evaluate fire and EMS departments. So communities hire me to come in and look at their entire operation, top to bottom, their budget, their staffing, their equipment, their trucks, and make recommendations on how to improve fire and EMS. So that's what I do for a living. So I just took that mindset and said, I'm not really going to look at what happened in the past. I'm just going to look at the data. You know, how many people are responding, how many calls we have, how much money we have, how much money we can bring in with revenue, what we need to buy, how we can be more efficient. And I applied that consulting kind of mindset to this and brought forth this levy request.
Well, I think it's a very thorough proposal.
I appreciate that.
It addresses the issues that people are going to face, which are, you know, you're going to have your fires, but you're going to have more EMS runs than you are going to have fire.
Absolutely. Sure.
I'm curious, do you know what the average response time is if people come from Harlan Township versus the average from the other townships around?
So when we have a run, it really can be all over the place. So there are times where we have volunteers at the firehouse. So we have a bunch of volunteers that don't live in Harlan Township. They come to Harlan Township to volunteer. So when they come to the firehouse, they actually stay at the firehouse. They sleep there, or if they're there during the day or they're there at night. When they're there, the ambulance is out the door responding in a minute or two. The problem is, the majority of the time, there's nobody at the station, right? So we all carry pagers and we have alerts on our phones. So when Warren County gets a 911 call, they alert Harlan Township. But if you live near the fire station, you hear the whistle go off and the clock starts. And it could be 4 minutes, it could be 6 minutes, it could be 8 minutes. Unfortunately, a lot of times, especially at night, it's 10 or 12 minutes before the volunteers. And I think about this. You get woken up out of sleep at 2 a.m. You have to find your clothes, find your shoes, find your car keys, get in your car, and drive to the firehouse. Then you have to put on your gear and equipment, get on a fire truck, and then the response starts to the scene. 45 square miles. So if you live on, let's say, the north end of Edwardsville Road, it may take you 10 minutes to get to the station. And then once you get the truck, it's going to take you 10 minutes to get to the fire. We're now at 20 minutes. By having some paid staff in the station, tones go off, they walk out, they get in the vehicle, and they respond. They're on their way. Somebody's going to be in the scene in 1, 3, 5, 7 minutes. At the same time, the volunteers are coming to bring the second truck, the third truck, whatever else we need. That's the model we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
With mutual aid, they always dispatch us first because, it's our responsibility to handle runs in Harlan Township. They will wait to see if we have a response. After so many minutes, I believe it's 4, they retone us a second time. If nobody responds at 8 minutes, then they dispatch mutual aid. So you're already 8 minutes into the call when mutual aid's called. And then let's say they're coming from Salem Morrow out down to Butlerville. That could be, an 8, 10 minutes. So again, you're at that 16, 18, 20 minutes to get help. So really the only solution to get fast emergency services in Harlan Township is for us to pay some people to do it. The other people just can't get here quick enough. It's
And to piggyback onto that a little bit, when we rely a lot on our mutual aid partner, right? So there's this system he's talking about utilizes computer assisted dispatching. So if we're not available, it will pick the next closest unit to your call. So if it might be Salem Morrow up there, it might be something else down on this side. Another issue we can run into is, let's say it's on that side, we're unavailable, we're 8 minutes in, and they dispatch Salem Township. Well, Salem Township might be short-staffed, and if they're short-staffed, they're not available. So we've taken another couple minutes. It takes a couple minutes, minute and a half to 2 minutes to get switched. Okay, Salem Morrow's to get dispatched. And then if they respond back, we're not available. Now the computer's going to go through and search again who's available. So you can very quickly get 10, 15 minutes while we're just trying to find an ambulance that's available. We had a call a few weeks ago that we went through 3 different ambulances to find when that was available. And that takes time. And then that ambulance is still 10 to 12 minutes away. So it can very easily get to 20 to 30 minutes to get an ambulance to your door, which is too long.
Yeah. If you're having a medical emergency, you don't want to wait 20, 30 minutes for an ambulance. That's dangerous. And the other thing, our mutual aid partners are wonderful people. All the neighboring chiefs, I talk to them on a regular basis. But they have told us, Harlan Township, you need to fix your Harlan Township problems. It's not our job in Goshen or Blanchester or Salem Morrow to handle your emergencies for free, like I talked about in the levy presentation, when we're asking our taxpayers to pay a lot more in taxes, right? So they're paying a much bigger levy in Salem Township, in Goshen Township, in Hamilton Township for paid staff, but their paid staff right now are providing free service to Harlan Township. They've pretty much told us at the end of the year that's going to stop if we don't fix the problem, and they're going to start billing. They're going to bill you for calling 911, and then they're going to bill us the balance. And like I said before, if we took our run numbers and multiplied it by a number that had been proposed on a per call, and it's, several $100,000 more than even this levy would bring in, we would be bankrupt. We can't afford it. The cheapest option is this levy. The best option is this levy. I swear. I've run the numbers multiple times. And I'll be honest with you, when Steve interviewed me to be your acting fire chief, he said, "What would you do?" One of my proposals was get rid of it, contract it all out. But it's not enough money. Even with the levy, it's not enough money to contract it out because they're not going to provide us a service for less than what they're charging their residents.
And we looked in it prior to me talking with Chief Peter. I had talked to some surrounding departments, and the number base, I said, okay, let's pretend worst case scenario, Harlan Township goes away, right? Like we just have a fire sale, everything is up for sale. How much are you going to charge me to do everything? And it was more than our entire township budget. So I could get rid of the road department completely, never pave another road in the history of Harlan Township. It's still not enough money to pay that contracted service. So it really wasn't an option. We can't not have roads. We're not allowed to not take care of roads, right? So we can't really dip that deep into those budgets. So it's a very, very big number because, you know, like you said, the neighborhood chiefs have done a lot for Harlan Township throughout the years, and you know, they have enough of their own issues, right? They're not real excited to say, oh yeah, we want to come and take on another 45 square miles of issues. They have enough of their own to deal with. So, and that, as well as the equity between our taxpayers and other taxpayers, you can't have a single fire department who is charging their home taxpayers this amount of money and then charging this group less money. Everybody's going to pay the same, and which is much more than what this levy ask is. Double probably total what this levy ask is. So we looked at a lot of different options. Almost, I won't say all of them in case there's something we're not thinking of, but lots of options have been looked at.
And we will continue to look at options.
Sure.
I think even I'm optimistic. We're going to pass the levy. We're going to fix this problem for our residents and our community. But next year, the year after, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when we have to talk about renewing the levy or replacing the levy, we're going to continue having these discussions because the cost of everything is just astronomically going up. Like if you had told me in 2020 that a fire truck would be $1 million, I would have told you were nuts. And now it's $1 million, $1.1 million, $1.2 million. Some departments, even in this area, some departments are paying 1.5 to 1.7 million for a fire engine. One fire engine. It's insane what is happening.
Right. They don't go many places. I mean, they're not like your truck where you put like 15,000 miles on your truck annually.
Yep.
So what causes them to wear out? Does the equipment just get outdated, or
so it's a variety of different things. So one, you know, fire trucks aren't mass produced like a car or a pickup truck. You know, there's no factory that's just churning out fire engines and they all look the same like they do a Ford F-150 pickup truck or a Chevy 2500 pickup truck. There's no fire truck manufacturer doing that. Every truck is built based upon the order. So when XYZ fire department decides we're going to buy a fire engine, you go in and meet with them, almost like you're building a custom house. It's almost like having an architect, and you design the truck. And so you say, okay, we want to carry 6 people. Okay, well, here's the cab that you need to fit 6 people, 6 seats. Do you want air pack seats? Okay, air pack seats, which are the seats to hold our self-contained breathing apparatus. Do you want any compartments? Are you going to carry EMS equipment in the cab? Yes, we want to carry our EMS equipment because it has to be temperature controlled, so we need that in the cab. Okay, how big of a pump do you want? We want a pump that pumps X gallons per minute. And so they just build the truck that way, but that's a very expensive way. Like if you build what's the word I'm looking for? There's home builders that build lots of the same houses. And, you know, in some big subdivisions. So you walk in there, it's kind of cookie cutter. So they mass produce those houses. There's little tweaks. You can change the color. You can change a window. You can do a bump out. But it's essentially the same house, right? And they're just building those over and over and over and over again. Or you can go to a custom builder to design and build your house. And you have a one-of-a-kind home that's yours. Fire apparatus are built that way. So all the companies that build fire trucks across the nation are custom fire truck builders. So they wait until Harlan Township's ready to build a truck, and then they design the truck for Harlan Township because Goshen Township's needs are different than Harlan Township's needs. The buildings, the roads, the driveways, we need to carry more water where they have more fire hydrants. So it changes the cost of the truck, the size of the truck. So that is our ambulance making a run right now. So that's awesome news. If you saw me look at my phone, that was the run being dispatched. So that's good news, right? Ambulance is going to a call. But I never expected trucks to double. Post everybody blames COVID, but post COVID, everything that we buy went up at least 100%, if not more. Even the Band-Aids, the IV needle, all the EMS supplies, we had stuff that we were paying $12 for that now we're paying $68 for. And those are one use, thrown in the garbage. It's astronomical what has happened. My first set of turnout gear, coat, boot, helmets, when I was a volunteer fireman at 16, 17 years old, cost like $350. Now a set of gears like 2,500, 3,000. And the gear I bought 40 years ago, you could wear as long as you wanted to until it fell apart. Now the gear has a 10-year lifespan. After 10 years, you have to get rid of it. And there's good reasons for that, but it just makes everything that much harder.
Well.
Any other questions? Appreciate everybody that came out tonight and your questions. Appreciate everybody that was online. And if you have other questions, please just feel free to reach out.